Whatever organization you join, you should never feel that you have to give up a part of yourself or something that is a human right. In the Jehovah's Witness organization, how many rights did people not have? They should have them, but they voluntarily gave them up. I had to keep a scarf with me out of respect for this 15-year-old because he was now spiritually my head. It's a hierarchy, right? You have to visibly show submission.
Fear is the biggest component that the organization uses to control and to strip away their human rights.
In order to stay in this organization, you have to follow the rules, no matter what you feel your personal rights are.
Decision making was so easy, it was very comfortable, but then when you leave, it's a mess. Now you're the ones creating your decisions, and now you have all these options out in the world. So how do you think someone can navigate that?
That's the tough part.
We have Crystalyn Adams, and Crystalyn Adams is a certified human rights consultant with over 20 years inside a high control religious group. As we know, that is the Jehovah's Witness religion. Chrysalin brings forth today her professional expertise as a human rights activist, consultant to the conversation. So today we're going to talk about the basic human rights that we lost when we were in the religion and how we can reclaim the freedom that we were always entitled to have and worthy of. Could you just share your background as a Jehovah's Witness? Were you born in? Were you recruited later on in life?
So my mother, she had exposure to Jehovah's Witnesses throughout her life. There was a Kingdom Hall in the town she grew up. So she went to high school with some Jehovah's Witnesses. And so throughout her life, she had exposure to it, but didn't really get serious about it until I was about 10 years old, which was my first knowledge of Jehovah's Witnesses. And she started to study, and I studied with her. I didn't have a separate study. I just sat in on all of her Bible studies. And the lady that studied with her started to ask her, do you want to go to the Kingdom Hall? And she said no for a long time. And then one day, I don't know what came over me at 10 years old said, I want to go. And so the lady said, okay. And so I went with her. And I liked it. I actually liked the Kingdom Hall. I liked that it was organized and quiet. And we had been to other churches when I was young that was a little bit loud, and that really didn't suit me as a kid. I got scared a little bit. And so this was really nice. So I came home from the Kingdom Hall and told my mom how much I liked it. And then the next Sunday, she started going, and she was regular attending ever since. And so she was baptized quickly within 6 months of that. And then we were all in when I was 10 years old.
You kind of influenced your mom.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And sometimes I wonder if I had come home that day and said I didn't like it. I wonder if we ever would have even become Jehovah's Witnesses, because a lot of it was that I said that I liked it, that she was like, okay, well, I'll give it a try if my kids like it. So
Yeah, right. I think you mentioned that you started working at nonprofit organizations when you were, even as a witness.
I started pioneering when I was 18. And that's also when I moved to help with the Spanish congregation. And one of the first jobs that I got there was working for a nonprofit organization that offered school and psychological services to children and families at a sliding scale fee. So it was low cost to the families.
Mhm.
And I think that's when I started to see things that I didn't necessarily agree with when it comes to how they don't offer a lot of services to families in need, the Jehovah's Witnesses. Because when I was working in the nonprofit, we would collaborate with other agencies. And there were a lot of churches or religious organizations that offered services to the community, and you didn't have to be part of their religion. It was just a community service. And I wondered why we never participated in that. Even for the members, the organization didn't have a structure to assist members in need.
That's very true.
And so I know individual congregations sometimes would come together to help members, their friends or family or other congregation members, but the organization itself never had any structured assistance programs for its members or for the community. And I saw that other organizations, other religious organizations did do that. And so I often wondered why that was. And I know they always said that the preaching was their community service, which is great. However, there are physical needs that people encounter in their life food, shelter, medical, that just preaching alone is not, you know what I mean, is not going to solve their problems. And so I think working at the nonprofit opened my eyes to that. But what it also did was gave me an outlet. I realized I really liked helping people. I
Mhm.
really like being part of the community in that way. I like being a resource to people. And in fact, even Jehovah's Witnesses who knew that I worked in the community would ask me, you know, if they needed assistance with things. They'd say, where could I go for this or where could I go for that? And I would tell them, well, this organization or that organization, which actually got me in trouble a couple of times. Because on one occasion, there was an organization at the time called Catholic Charities,
Mm,
and they offered immediate assistance, like if people needed their electric bill paid or just anything.
yeah.
And I made the mistake one time of recommending them to somebody who needed assistance, and it got back to the elders.
Wow.
I had recommended, but it's not through the church, it's for anybody. Like, you
Right.
have to go to their church.
It's just a
It's
service.
a service. It was a
Yeah.
nonprofit supported by the Catholic organization. And in
Yeah.
my opinion, I felt that it was the same as a hospital. We went to hospitals that were, originally founded by religious organizations, and Jehovah's Witnesses would go to those hospitals. So
Yeah.
I felt that it was the same, but
Hmm.
apparently the elders did not think it was the same.
To them, it was like Babylon the Great.
Right. But I said, if they go to the elders and say they're having these needs and
Hmm.
and everybody's just saying pray,
Oh, yeah.
and so I thought, well, you can go over there and get something. And then on another occasion, I was talked to because I had a Bible study,
Hmm.
and her husband had left her, and she didn't speak English, and she didn't have a job, and she was being supported basically by her friends because she had nothing.
Mm,
And I told her, I said, well, you need to go and get food assistance for your children. There was a program called WIC. I said, well, I'll take you. So instead of studying, I took her to a WIC office, and that day she got assistance, food assistance for her baby.
that's great.
And yeah, gotten a little trouble about that one too because I was there. I was supposed to study with her,
Mm, that
and
was more a priority than getting assistance for her situation.
yeah, I figured she needed. So I canceled the rest of my day, and I took her to get assistance,
Right.
and that didn't go over too well either. I was doing too much.
But I feel like you just have this natural human compassion, to just help people. It doesn't matter what label or title or the name of the organization is, this person needs help. And you had the resource to do that. Um, Unfortunately, someone was policing you and then you got in trouble. Going back to what you said earlier, it's either you or the individual members that are contributing or helping, not the organization.
Correct. And I
Yes.
always had an issue with that silently because, of course, you don't
Be-
really say too much.
yes.
You don't want to
Yeah.
get labeled as a
But your
problem.
exposure to the nonprofit organization and their structure and what they do to just communities, even outside, their internal community, how they help the society, the other humans grow in society was something that was
Yeah.
attractive to you. Were there other things that started to surface and make things more visible to you?
So over time, throughout the years, things would come up that would make me question, even starting when I was young.
Hmm.
A friend of mine who we actually got baptized at the same district convention, they called them district conventions back then. We were baptized at the same time, and she and I were babysitting for someone.
Hmm.
And when we went to drop baby off, we saw some inappropriate, things.
Uh-oh.
Well, we thought were inappropriate. So we told her mom, and her mom told my mom and convinced my mom that we needed to go to the elders and tell them what we
Hmm.
saw. So I think I was like 13 years old, and they didn't let my mom in the room. Like, they made a committee about it to address it, and they wouldn't let my mom go in. But then when I went in there, this woman, she was in her early 20s, her dad was in there with her because he was an elder when my mom was single.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, even at 13, I thought, well, that's interesting that her father can be in here, but my mom couldn't come in here. So here I am, saying what I saw in a panel of men and her in the room at 13 by myself. Knew something was wrong with that at an early age, the process of how they do that with minors and how minors are in a room with adults, sometimes having to discuss intimate situations, and they have no parent or guardian representation.
And that was just your internal moral compass.
That was my own internal feeling from having participated as a witness, or as, having to tell what I saw of someone else's behavior. Literally in my whole time after that as Jehovah's Witness, I never was involved in
Yeah.
any judicial committee. Not as a witness, not telling on myself. I that was not comfortable to me.
But you continued your pioneering, and
I
you continued your
continued on.
service because you had a intimate relationship with Jehovah.
Yeah, and I love to study. I
Oh yeah.
really loved to study. I really, even as a child, I was into the doctrine. I mean, even when my mother was studying, when I was 10 years old, I had the book with me. I had my own book. One of those kind of nerdy kids, I guess, cover to cover, read the Bible in a year. You know how they always said, read the Bible in a year, and they had a little schedule.
You had your spiritual goals
I
and
had my, yeah. And then when I turned 18, I was just going to pioneer. I did want to go to college. I had opportunities,
yeah.
good grades and counselors at school telling me that I should apply, but I didn't. I was like, no, I'm going to pioneer.
Yeah.
So right out of high school, I started pioneering.
Self-sacrifice.
Yeah, so I started pioneering, and I moved to the Spanish congregation right out of high.
Wow. Wow. You were like an epitome of just a great example of a JW single sister, right? On the cover of the Awake magazine.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm surprised I wasn't. Yeah.
But with all of this stuff, I mean, it seems like you just had such a great spiritual resume, right? You pioneered supported foreign congregations. You really self-sacrificed and extended yourself. So it must have been really shocking to everyone when you left.
It was very shocking. I did start leaving hints a little bit, because I had friends who were circuit overseers and
Wow.
regular pioneer and had been missionaries. And so, I knew who I could talk to about certain things that I
Hmm.
was disagreeing with. And I did bring it up on occasion, like just in conversation, little things about some of the changing doctrine that started happening around I would say, early 2000s, late 90s.
Why do you think intelligent people stay in high control groups like this? Because Jehovah's Witnesses are not dumb individuals.
What I realized talking to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses after I left and being part of that community is that um, people were there for different reasons. Some people were very much into the doctrine and very much into reading the Bible and very studious. And some people were just rule followers. Maybe because of their family ties, they were just raised in, and this is just what you do. This is how you live. And they really did strongly believe in the promises of paradise, and maybe they had dead loved ones and they really wanted to see them again. And so even though they questioned things, maybe they had even been treated poorly, they stay because of the what if they're right. What if I can see my family again in paradise? People who have families, it's a really big decision, right? To leave, because there are some real consequences that could come along with that. It's even people who have their businesses that are primarily, they either have customers that are Jehovah's Witnesses, or they have a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that work for them. They could lose their business if they leave, because people will stop, being their customers, or their employees might all quit.
Yeah.
So there's real consequences that people have to think about. And I think it keeps a lot of people staying, even if
Mhm.
they do disagree strongly with some of the doctrine, or even if they've been mistreated. It's not easy to walk away from everything. But for me, because I was in the doctrine so much, once that started slipping, I had my own fears about leaving, primarily like loss of contact with my family, things like that. But it just got to a point where I could not sit there and pretend to agree with this anymore. And I definitely couldn't preach it anymore.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people get to the point where, regardless of what happens, I can't stay here anymore. Once I started going to school, because I was all in when I was Jehovah's Witness, I was
Yeah.
all in. And so once I was half out, some of my attention was someplace else. I started meeting people who thought about things the way I thought about things, as far
Yeah.
as helping people. They introduced me to different books and
Ooh.
about spirituality and about our environment. Um, just different things that I started reading, and reading more about other things and less of the literature of Jehovah's Witness literature.
Yeah, and this seems to be like a passion for you too,
Yeah.
researching. But before we get into your human rights profession, I think it's important to talk about what human rights even is and how it got started. So could you share a little bit about
Well,
that?
back after the Second World War in the 40s, late 40s, there started to be conversations among different countries about how can we prevent this type of a thing from happening again. And so many nations involved, including the United States, in coming up with what they called articles of human rights. What are basic human rights that everyone should have, no matter what country they live in, no matter their social status, that everyone should have just because we're human beings? And so they wrote up a document, the Declaration of Human Rights, and basically it was an effort to say, no matter what happens in the government, with governments, or in between countries, this is how people should be treated. It doesn't matter the conflict. These are the basic rights that everyone should have. And with the development of this document, many countries went and instituted laws in their own countries to protect people's rights. So in the United States, for example, we had the civil rights movement. Of course, all along there had been, women's rights, suffrage movement, everything. So what happened is they started to make laws, actual changes to the law to protect people's rights. So violating certain rights became a crime. Whereas before, things like domestic violence, abuse of children, those things way back early 1900s, there
Right.
were not laws to prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
And so after World War II, there were more laws being put in place, not just in the United States, but other countries also to actually protect people's rights. So that I started getting interest in thinking of when I was in the Jehovah's Witness organization, how many rights did people not have?
Mm-hmm.
They should have them, but they voluntarily
Voluntarily.
gave them up.
Wow.
They voluntarily gave them up. And I'll give you an example. When I was Jehovah's Witness, if someone at work or just on the street asked me, do you think women can run businesses? I would say, of course, women can run businesses. Women can be CEOs of companies. There are women who are in government. Yeah, there are judges that are women. Of course, women can be leaders in the community. Women can be leaders in organizations. But then at the Kingdom Hall,
Mhm.
women can't be leaders at all.
We can't even hold the mic, or was it hold the
Carry
microphone?
the microphone. Yeah. You can't be a leader in the congregation like the elders. You're certainly not going to be on the governing body. You couldn't stand and give talks. You could only do little skits with other with other people on the stage. You could comment from your seat. I
Mhm.
remember the meeting for filters, for example. One time there was this teenager and he had gotten baptized, but he, of course, was not ready to be conducting meetings for field service to present the group out. So they were like, well, Crystal, you can do it, but you have to cover your head. So I
Oh
had
yeah,
to
the head
cover my
covering.
head and wear a scarf out of respect for this 15-year-old
Wow.
male who got baptized
Wow.
because he was now spiritually my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not
Wow.
supposed to be teaching him. And so I had to keep a scarf with me all the time because I was put in these type of positions, often where I had to do things that were supposed to be done by brothers, but I was stepping in, and so I had to humble myself and show submission.
It's almost like you're not worthy enough.
Well, it's a hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
You have to visibly show submission.
Yes.
So that's visibly showing everyone that even though I'm doing this thing I'm not technically supposed to do, I'm doing it in a humble way.
Mm-hmm.
But if at that time you had said to me, could a woman be a CEO of a company? I would have said, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a woman can run an organization. And women start businesses. Women can be in government. Women can do anything. But yet on the other side, I was allowing myself to be silent and not speak up when I thought things weren't right
Mm-hmm.
as far as the treatment of women. So I started noticing things like that. Also with like children, because early on in my nonprofit work was with organizations that worked with children. And what I noticed was that when children volunteer for organizations, just secularly, like just help building homes or help just any nonprofit, help at soup kitchens or anything like that, there are rules, right? So
Mm-hmm.
You typically you have to have parental consent in writing. You have to, there's certain labor laws that can't be violated, so they can't work over a certain amount of hours when they're minors. They have to document what type of work they're doing. And also they have to show how many adults per minor will be supervising whatever volunteer activities. Also, they require certain background checks be done on those adults who will be supervising the minors to make sure their criminal records that don't conflict with,
Right.
being around minors. When I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, none of that was done to protect young people. On one occasion, I remember my sister volunteering to help construction at a assembly hall, and there were a lot of young people that went.
Right.
There was no parental consent in writing. No information to parents were given about what work they were going to be doing. They just, all these kids just went.
Mm.
And my sister came home covered in something, and my mother said, what is this on you? And she said, well, they had us handling sheetrock, not sheetrock, insulation,
Mhm. Wow.
with just their bare
Yeah.
hands, no protection equipment. And it ended up that she had little tiny shards of like fiberglass on her. And my
Jesus.
mom spent the evening cleaning her because that could be dangerous if it gets into your pores because they're
Mhm.
very small. And my mom was very upset about that. Those type of things happened a lot where young people would be used in volunteer service without proper supervision, and without the people supervising them having been vetted in any way other than the fact that they are Jehovah's Witnesses and go to the Kingdom Hall. Someone is Jehovah's Witness and they're going to send their child out into a secular situation. They're, well, who are these people? What are you going to be doing? And they want to be very careful. But when it comes to inside the organization, they don't make anyone sign any documents that their child is going to be safe, who's going to be around their child, who, no, none of that. It's just work, 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 work for the organization, you work for, the kingdom interests or however they word it.
Yeah.
Like there's no other protections put in place when people are dealing with minors, even auxiliary pioneering as a minor. And now they've even done studies about children being overscheduled and how that can affect their development as far as having school and work and homework and all the activities. What effects psychologically or even physical does that have on a child? And so none of these things are taken into consideration over scheduling children.
Yeah. It's just crazy because again, like when I was in the organization, I just always viewed Jehovah's organization as the perfect organization and it's super organized. But in reality, they're not that organized. It's
And
it's
they
all
don't
it's all about trust.
and it's secrecy also, because you were
Secrecy.
always, as a child, if you're raised in, you learn at a very young age, you're not supposed to sue your brother. You don't want to do anything that's going to bring, they say reproach.
Reproach.
Yeah, exactly. But really what they mean is to put the organization in a bad light.
Right.
And so whenever something happens in the organization that if you were not in the organization, you would go to the police, you would get a lawyer. If someone stole money from you, you would sue. If you were working a business and someone didn't pay their invoices, you could sue them. But when
Mm-hmm.
it's inside the organization, you're supposed to go to the elders first and talk to them and see if you could work it out and go through all this process. And because they think about how that's going to affect them in the organization, in the congregation. What are people going to say? Because there are examples of people who do speak out and then they are labeled apostates or they become, ostracized, shunned. And there's, so it's sometimes people decide to just stay quiet, which is not good because we all know what that does. It means that abuses continue. So
Yep.
that's, yes, that's the human rights part of it. Do I have a right to not be abused?
Exactly.
Do I have a right to go to the authorities without
Yeah. But
losing my family or my business or, being shunned?
yeah. Or even just the right to life when it comes to blood transfusions.
Yeah.
That's another one, you know.
But it's funny because there's something that happens in your mind because
Mhm.
if you're talking about it, about anything on the outside. Like if you read in an article that some woman was in the hospital and denied treatment, you, even as a Jehovah's Witness, I would have been outraged.
Mhm.
But then at the same time, I'm carrying this blood card around with me that they say I can't take any blood. I always felt a pull about that. There were things that I believed, that I did believe was the rights of everybody. But in order to stay in this organization, I have to humble myself. I have to stay
Wow.
in line. I have to agree with the fact that everything is run by men, even though, especially in Spanish congregation, most of the attendees were women. So most of the attendees, more than 50% of the attendees were women.
I think there's
They had
definitely,
no say in anything.
yeah, a gender gap. I think there is just more women in the organization than men.
Yeah, but they have no power.
But they have no power. They're very silenced and women rights.
Just women's rights, just
Women's rights.
human rights that everyone should have. And so when I started studying about that, that's what got me interested in the human rights and seeing how not just it affects globally, but also within countries that we say have rights, you have sections of communities where people really don't have rights because they're in organizations where they have been conditioned that they are not able to speak up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That they're not able to participate in governing the organization or making rules in the organization. And it can be a very dangerous place for people who are not empowered in high control groups. And that's the awareness or that's the part of the human rights that I hope that people realize needs to change. Like whatever organization you join, you should never feel that you have to give up a part of yourself or something that is a human right, or even something that's just a right in your country. You shouldn't have to give that up or be silent in an organization. And that doesn't necessarily mean religious. That could be, there's other groups that it could be a group, a college study group. It could be a political group. It could be a secular group to advance your career. There are lots of groups out there that start off perfectly fine, but all of a sudden, there's things you can't do, things you're not supposed to talk about. Well, if you want to be a part of this group, you have to stop talking to this person. If you want to be a part of this group, these people are the enemy. So we start looking at others in a different light, right? They're not deserving. Really?
Yeah.
So if someone is not a part of your organization, they can be mistreated. They can be abused because they're not a part of you. So it goes both ways, right? When you're talking about people's rights, either everybody has them, not just people in your group.
Right.
Not people in your group are protected, but everybody else, who cares what happens to them? That's also a very dangerous way to think when you're in a high control group, that other people, because that means that other people can be harmed. That means other people can have their rights taken away because you say they don't deserve the rights. They don't deserve those rights because they're not like us.
Sounds familiar, and especially in the climate right now.
Yeah.
So you've worked in human rights and immigration, and I wanted to just talk more about how you compared being labeled an apostate to how undocumented people are stigmatized. Can you just share more about that?
Within the Jehovah's Witness organization and other religious organizations, whenever people speak up or speak out against not necessarily even abuses, just disagreements with doctrine or disagreements with the rules, they're often labeled as apostate. And it's a loaded word. Like people who have never been involved in high control religious groups hear that word and it doesn't really mean very much to them. They may look it up in the dictionary and say, oh, it means that you stopped believing one thing and started believing another thing. It's pretty basic in the dictionary of what of what it is. But in a religious organization that uses that word, it means that that person is now an enemy. That person is the most dangerous person, and you should never speak to them again. You should never listen to them again. You shouldn't be in their presence. You shouldn't even say hello to them because it might be a danger to you spiritually. That's what Jehovah's Witness said. If you talk to an apostate, they are now a dangerous person because they're going to say things to you to try to make you leave, which now you'll lose all of the benefits of maybe living in paradise. You'll lose spirituality. You'll be weak spiritually, which is another loaded phrase. You're spiritually weak because you ask questions, because you don't want to be labeled as spiritually weak, because what that means is people are going to limit their association with you. And so that is a trigger phrase. It triggers Jehovah's Witnesses to be leery of you, right? And to be leery of a person who's labeled spiritually weak, because that means that they have what they used to say, like, one foot in the world, right? And so you don't know.
Or lukewarm.
Or lukewarm. Yeah, that was like, can you trust this person because they've been labeled as spiritually weak?
The outcome of what's happening to the person could deteriorate someone's mental health.
Correct.
You know,
and that's
depression and low self-esteem and a lot of self-doubt.
And the funny thing about it is the things that could get you labeled as spiritually weak were actually very strong personality traits. For example, speaking up for yourself, defending others, having outside interests, questioning authority, all of those things that
Critical thinking.
critical thinking, all of the things that in another environment would be considered you are a strong personality,
Yes.
you're a strong person. Within a high control group, that is labeled as a weakness. And you don't want to be considered weak. So the things that make you strong, you suppress.
Yeah.
So
Or
no
you're
one,
labeled as a troublemaker.
you're a troublemaker and people don't want to be around you. And then the things that they say make you strong, like you're spiritually strong if you attend all the meetings, volunteer every single free minute that you have to serving the organization, not questioning authority,
Just
right?
being a follower.
Just following the rules.
Buy a van
Well,
instead of a convertible for
right.
service.
Yes. All of those things mean that you're strong. So it's like flip-flop.
Yeah.
You know,
But
it's like, and these labels mean something because, like you said, it triggers an action.
yeah.
If someone says you're spiritually weak, then that means people are going to avoid you. So people are made to be villains of the story, right? So who are the villains of my story? For Jehovah's Witnesses and other religious groups, apostates are the villain, right?
Can't read apostate material.
You can't read, you can't talk to them, don't listen to them, don't let them hand you any materials.
And
Anything bad that happens to them, they deserved it. They're the villain. Well, on the outside, who's the villain? In order for me to be right, somebody else has to be wrong.
right.
In order for me to get ahead, somebody else has to be behind. Who benefits?
It's almost hate speech.
Right, who benefits? Like if you're in the congregation and you're saying apostates are bad, people who get disfellowship, don't speak to them. What you're doing is you're building up the organization. You're keeping support for the organization and the people that run the organization. You're towing the line for them. The actual members they're not getting any benefit from that. You're losing talking to your family members. You're losing talking to your children or your parents. You're losing your friends. The members aren't benefiting from that kind of a thing, but the organization is benefiting. They're getting contributions. They're gaining
It's running their organization.
right. So I always think about that too. Like who's benefiting from me thinking this way?
Yeah.
I'm not benefiting.
To a JW, if they shun their loved ones, it's like an example, that they are loyal to Jehovah.
But really it's loyalty to the
It
organization.
really is loyalty to the
That's
organization.
the other part of the loaded language part, right?
Yeah.
Because when I got baptized in 85. I'm aging myself. And that was the first year that they changed the baptismal questions that you know how.
Yeah, the questions you
Right.
yeah,
So the questions changed that year from that used to say something like, do you recognize this baptism shows that you're a servant of Jehovah? That's kind of what the questions were before. And after 85, the question was, do you recognize that this baptism will associate you with being one of Jehovah's Witnesses and part of the organization?
Interesting.
The wording changed that year.
You
So
don't even know.
yeah. So now you're not even saying that this baptism means that I'm a follower of Jesus or Jehovah. You're saying, oh no, the organization.
Organization. Wow.
Yeah. So those little things do things in your mind, right? So
That's interesting.
so subtly, a change went into effect. And the change was you have to support the organization. So even though they say Jehovah, even though they say we're followers of Christ, they started changing language that really you were supposed to be faithful to the rules of the organization. And if you weren't, they could put you out of the organization, essentially.
Yeah.
You have children, back to minors. So you have children saying these words, getting baptized at 9 and 10 years old. And then if something happens when they're 16, they're being held to what they said. You're part of this organization. These are the rules. So we will kick you out.
And again, I think that the change in language, you don't even realize how sneaky the language is and how sneaky they're stripping away your human rights slowly.
They're slowly making you that their rules are more important than your personal rights. And so in order to stay in this organization, you have to follow the rules, no matter what you feel your personal rights are.
And human rights are, again, going back to the definition, it's supposed to help you, it's supposed to protect you, and it's supposed to help you thrive in society. One of the human rights that Jehovah's Witnesses strip you away from is the right to education. So I'm pulling up a stat here. It's the household income of US religious groups, right? It has all types of religions. Now, this is over a decade ago, but I think it's still pretty relatable, right? So it just gives us a list of the percentage of each religious group with total family income, per year. And we're talking about right to education, because the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses discourage their members to pursue higher education, and instead of pursuing higher education, they want them to self-sacrifice, and they want them to devote a lot of their time at a young age to the preaching work, to a lot of the free labor stuff. But when they leave, they are at a disadvantage. And it shows here that amongst all the religions, Jehovah's Witnesses, they fall at the very bottom of the salary gap. So there is definitely a big salary disparity between us and all the other religions. So it's really a special disadvantage that ex-Jehovah's Witnesses have to face after they leave the organization. And again, I think Jehovah's Witnesses, they are not just hard workers, but they have a lot to offer too that can positively change the world. But
Well,
I just wanted to share this piece of data that I thought that was very interesting. And I'm pretty sure, even though this is a decade, over, I just feel like this is still pretty applicable right now.
it is applicable because that's another way that they can to ensure that, well, in their opinion, that you are not going to succeed outside of the organization because you don't have the education, you don't have the finances, and it makes it very difficult. Because remember, whenever someone leaves, they condition us that they're going to experience hardship because they
Mhm.
left, because they no longer are spiritually protected. But really, the hardship comes from, like you said, with lack of education, and which limits your prospects of earning a living, especially if you live in an area that's very expensive. And so, yes, definitely that it's a part of the control to keep people in a financial limitations, especially if you're a young person, that fear, like, where am I going to go? Where am I going to live? If you're 18, 19, 20 years old, where are you going to go if you leave? You don't have an education, you don't have money.
You don't realize how much you need it until you leave the organization, because now it's like a compound effect. You don't have the right education, then you don't have the skills on top of it because you were using a lot of your energy and self-sacrifice in the organization.
Yeah, they want to limit your reading. Uh,
Yeah,
so
self-development.
you're encouraged to, well, you used to be encouraged to read just their literature, to
Mhm.
research everything just in their literature,
Yeah.
and not really go outside of that. So you weren't supposed to read any other religious books or documents or anything from a different religion or
Hmm.
different perspective. You were only supposed to look at anything from their perspective, and they tell you what that perspective is. You don't even
Yep.
have to guess, right? They tell you what their perspective is, and you're supposed to use that as a measuring stick for everything else that you encounter in your life. And they don't want you to read anything else that
Hmm.
might contradict that, or even that might educate you about their own past,
Yeah.
right? They don't really want you to even know the things that they did when their organization was starting. And so they limit your access within their own literature, but also they discourage you from reading outside literature or getting education. And one of the reasons is because of the critical thinking. Because
Hmm.
when you go to college, for example, they ask you questions. What do you think about this? Read this book or read this chapter in this book and write a paper about what you think. How do you think this applies? And when I went to college after leaving, I had that was very interesting to me. And it opened my eyes to the fact that this is exactly what they don't want Jehovah's Witnesses to do. They don't want you to read something and develop your own opinion based
Hmm.
on what is written. They don't want you to read something and base your opinion on what they tell you it means. And I think it's getting harder and harder to control that because of the internet and
Yeah.
because of just changes in within the next generation of young people. They're very inquisitive.
Fear is the biggest component that the organization uses to control and to strip away their human rights.
So you know how people say you're a people pleaser.
Hmm.
A lot of people say, "Oh, people, that's a people pleaser." But when you're in a high control group, it's not a people pleaser. It's a fear of displeasing people.
Yeah.
It's an actual fear that you're going to upset someone in authority to the point that it might affect, your not just your standing in the community, but in your family. Maybe if they're right, maybe you won't even make it to paradise.
Right.
So there's an actual fear.
Yeah.
If you're a true believer in the doctrine, you have a fear that, the end is coming and you want to survive the end. So I can't leave because I have to stay here to survive the end.
Mhm.
If you're a rule follower, then you stay in because I have a fear of losing connection with my family members.
Mm.
If I disobey these rules, my parents may not speak to me anymore,
Yeah.
or my spouse might divorce me.
Mhm.
So it's fear-based, but the fears are different for each person,
Yeah.
right? But definitely the control part is fear-driven in one way or another.
Yeah. The strategies they use. Because now I'm thinking like, yeah, you mentioned the information control, they control what we read and what we see and everything so that we don't explore or we don't get to live or thrive in the world.
Yeah. And if you do decide to leave, or if you've been disfellowshipped and are being shunned and now you're on the outside of the organization, then there's a fear because you've been taught your whole life that you can't succeed in that world.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't succeed in the secular world. You're not supposed to.
When we're in the organization, because they stripped a lot of our human rights, we have less choices to make. At the end of the day, we have less choices, especially as women, we have less choices. Decision making was so easy, it was very comfortable, but then when you leave, it's a mess. So
Yes.
now you're the ones creating your decisions, and now you have all these options out in the world. So how do you think someone can navigate that?
That's the tough part, because when I was in Jehovah's Witness, especially if you're a woman, there's only a handful of options you have. You can regular pioneer, you can go to a foreign language, learn a foreign language and help a group out. You can get married, and if you get married, your options are go with him to Bethel, go with him to be a missionary, go with him as a wife of a circuit overseer. So you have a few more options if you get married, but really when you're just a single woman, there's not a lot of options, which can be comfortable for some people
Mhm.
because fewer choices means that I'm just going to pick a lane. I'll just pick one. And I'll just, whatever the consequences are, whatever hardships come, I'm just going to stay in that lane that I picked.
Mhm.
And then when you leave, like when I was leaving, I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that I wanted to learn, and I knew that I wanted to have a passion about something, a profession, but I didn't know what it was. I had already, while I was still in, had an interest in like health and things like that. And I wasn't at that time ready to just full blown go to college. And so I was looking for a vocation that I could go to get certification in. So that helped me, going right from being Jehovah's Witness into something that was something that I enjoyed doing. That kind of helped.
Sadly, a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, when they leave the organization, they end up in another high control group, whether it's political, whether it's, a different type of setting, but it's underneath it, it's still the same. They're still being controlled. And that's why knowing your boundaries, trying to give yourself space and to reconnect with your true identity before joining something else could be beneficial to a person's healing journey, and just finding that space to realign with who they truly are.
Slow yourself down, because a lot of people get real excited, right? I found this group. It's
Oh,
great.
yeah. I mean, because we had the freedom stripped away from us, the freedom to associate with the world. Sometimes we have the tendency to just go with what's comfortable, and that comfort is still the group identity.
Yes, that's a comfortable space, is for someone else to
Exactly.
tell you what to do. Yes, that's correct. That could be a comfortable space for people. Is there's too many choices out in the world. I want someone to just tell me what I should be doing right now.
I was
And if
just used to
someone
three
tells
options. I was just
right. Yeah, please tell me what I'm supposed to do right now. And then if you end up somewhere where someone says, okay, I'll tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. And then you're like, okay, this is a comfortable space for me to have someone else tell me I'm just going to do this. But then you have the opposite, where people are like, I'm free. I can experience any and everything all day long.
I think in their mind, they're like, I just lost 30 years.
Yeah,
Let me
I'm
go do
gonna do
everything.
everything. Yeah, I wasn't that way though. I wasn't a let me do everything. I was definitely um like let me slow down and think a little
That's good.
bit.
Because
Find out.
it's two extremes, like
Yes, yeah,
no
yeah.
freedom and then whoosh, all this freedom. Do you find that there were benefits from being a Jehovah's Witness that you can take over and find resourceful to your life now?
Definitely do think so, because, talking to people, I always was, out preaching, talking to people. So that was helpful. Also, preparing, even though we were studying from their literature, we were taught good study habits. I mean, I still like to read. I've always been a big reader. And so I do still like to read. I still like to talk to people.
Structure was
I'm
good.
not, I'm not exactly an extrovert. Like I am not the life of the party. I don't necessarily want or like a lot of attention,
Yeah.
but I can push myself to start conversations with people that are like strangers. That is not easy for
I
like
think it's just your
they're-
interest, your natural interest in people.
right. I have a natural interest in people. I'm a people watcher.
Yeah.
I do try things, but I do try to investigate a little before getting involved, if possible, ask a lot of questions. So for people who are leaving, that could be like not that could be a little bit of a scary place because you're not taught to do that.
Mhm.
You're like even making friends. It's like go visit a new Kingdom Hall and you'll meet
Yeah, friends are
to the
given to you.
assembly and you'll meet someone.
Yeah.
And you don't have to ask a lot of questions because as long as you ask them, do they attend the meetings? Are they going out in field service? Okay, they're good. I
Yeah.
can be friends with them. You're told to suppress your own intuition,
Your own desires.
own
Yeah.
desires. So if you are an intuitive person by nature,
Mhm.
you're taught to push that down. It doesn't matter if you get a bad feeling about somebody, that's your brother. You have to be around them. So what you're taught to push down your own instincts and your
Yeah.
own intuitions. So then when you leave, you almost have to you have to rediscover that in yourself and learn how to start listening to yourself. Otherwise, you can become a victim to a different type of a controlled environment, whether it be another high control group, whether it be another controlling relationship, personal
Mhm.
relationship. And so you have to develop that. You have to start learning to trust yourself. The hardest thing when you leave is also what is bad and what is good because they've told you what is good
What's
and bad. They told you
mhm.
what people are good people and what people are bad people. And now you are out in the world amongst everyone having to decide for yourself, and the judgment of others might still be there a little bit.
We're kind of arrogant because we came from exclusive organization. We thought we were special and we judged a lot of people. So we can carry a lot of that judgment onto others and self-judgment back to us.
And it's not even, we don't think we're judging people either
Exactly. Right.
because we're taught that we're not judging people. We're taught that it's a protection,
Protection. Yeah.
protecting
There
yourself
goes with the
from wickedness.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah, is the
So you're
language.
protecting yourself from wickedness. So then when you're not in that organization anymore, you don't think you're judging. You think you still think you're protecting yourself from something bad.
Right.
You don't see it as judging other people. And so that kind of shift in the way you think
Hmm.
also needs to occur, that just because someone's different doesn't mean they're bad. Just
Right.
because someone lives a different lifestyle, that doesn't mean they're a bad person. It doesn't even mean that their lifestyle is a bad lifestyle. It's just different.
Out of all of the human rights that we lost in the organization, is there one that you're happy that you were able to reclaim?
I think the main thing is not to have other people put limitations on your movement, on your conduct, on who you can talk to. This idea that everyone should have the same thinking, everyone should want the same thing. I I think I realized that that is unrealistic to think that everyone is going to have singular thinking. Everyone wants to be a pioneer. No, they
Mhm.
don't. Every man wants to be an elder. No, they don't. Every 19-year-old wants to go to Bethel. No, they don't. And I think that making people feel that what their choices are, that they're wrong for them, that's the part that I didn't like, and the part that I'm glad that I left and am free to express myself, speak my mind, be around people that I want to be around and not forced, those are the things. But I think the main thing is the freedom of expression, the freedom for you to speak your mind without fear of losing everything, losing your family, losing your friends, losing your community for speaking your mind in a way that, the leadership disagrees with. That's the biggest thing for me personally, because you can't really be a support to others if you are always worried about what someone in authority is thinking about what you're saying. So if I want to help someone, like I was trying to help people by telling them about services in the community, but then I was being shut down or being told, no, you can't tell someone about a service that's offered through another church or through an organization supported by another church. That I can't do that. I can't help somebody in that way. Wait, but how can you tell me how I can help somebody? Like how can you control me in that way to tell me that I'm not able to tell somebody where they can find food, where they can find actual therapists that can help them because it's through organization supported through by Methodists. So I can't tell them to go there and get help.
That's your true identity. That was
That
really
is,
you.
yeah.
That's you helping out, going out, trying to help people be resourceful. That is, Crystalyn's true identity. It was just controlled by the group identity.
Yes, and controlled by the child in me that wanted to follow the rules.
Yeah.
Child was still there too.
Mm.
So even after I left, I was still afraid of like that people would get upset with me if
The
I
people
said,
pleasing.
yeah, if I said something that they didn't agree with. That part of it, I'm glad that I'm free of that, and also free to read what I want to read without being afraid, or not just read it, but to be able to talk about it. Because I read a lot of things that I wasn't supposed to be reading.
But to actually engage and talk
But to
about it.
actually be able to talk about it and say, wow, I read this book. It was crazy. What do you think about this? Like to have people in your life that you can
But
express yourself freely to.
does that just make your life more vibrant, more alive?
I realize now that I was depressed
Mm-hmm.
in the last year, the last probably 4 or 5 years that I was Jehovah's Witness. But part of it was because I just was thinking differently. I had different ideas. I was developing different interests, and I couldn't talk about it freely. I couldn't say anything to the people in my community for fear of being outcast or for being told that I'm wrong for, reading certain things or saying certain things or thinking a certain way. And it took me a while to finally get to my breaking point with that and say, I can't be here anymore. If I can't be myself fully and show up fully, then that's not the place for me to be anymore.
It seems like pioneering was kind of like the stepping stone, like the being in nonprofit and JW and all of that. And then once you were able to leave the organization, you were able to just expand your love for humanity and just serve them in the way that feels authentic to you. But with your professional experience in human activism and human rights, what do you wish people better understood about emotional and spiritual abuse in high control groups like this?
I hope that people will understand that you have to have a level of compassion,
Mhm.
because if people have not had this type of an experience in their life,
Yeah.
it's really hard to understand that this could happen to someone. Like it's very easy for people to say that could never happen to me. I could never fall for that. No one could ever control me. It's very easy to take that stand when you haven't been in this type of situation. But I would encourage people to think from a human standpoint that whatever got that person to be in that environment, they're still just people that need help. And whether you think it was ridiculous that they got involved in some crazy scheme or some high control group or some weird meditation group or whatever it could be, that's so weird that you got involved in that. That doesn't mean they're a weak person.
Right.
That just means that they were influenced because at that point in their life they were looking for something and they fell into a pattern of thinking or an organization that initially fulfilled what they were looking for or what they needed. If they needed community, if they needed a belief system, if they needed some peace in their life, and they thought they found it. So people who say this could never happen to me, it could happen to you.
Go ahead.
It could happen because at some point in everyone's life, they're going to meet some challenge. And depending on where you find relief or help, it could end up being, if you're not careful and you're not
Yeah.
aware of certain tactics that groups use, it could absolutely happen to anyone. And so people who are very judgmental about people who have been in these type of organizations, be very careful in your judgment because it could happen.
Yeah, yeah. Because we didn't know we were a victim or being spiritually abused, or we didn't realize that we were part of a cult or high control religion at all. Because again,
There was something good that you
there was
saw.
some, yeah, yeah. And
And
it
for me,
was
it was community.
community. Mine, well, yeah, relationship with Jehovah and my association. When you go back to why we joined, I know why I joined. It was a vulnerability that I had when I was younger, right? I didn't make friends easily when I was younger. I had a learning disability. I still do. So there was some stuff about the organization that fulfilled that need for me.
Yeah.
The structure, the learning how to read and write, and then the love bombing and the community.
Yeah.
Those were all the things that I needed to thrive. But that thrive was just a limit. So what would you tell your younger self looking back at your journey? Is there anything that you would tell younger Crystalyn?
I would tell my younger self to not be so fearful of like displeasing people and to ask more questions, not be afraid to make decisions just for me, for
Mm.
myself, and not basing those decisions on how it's going to affect other people. How are my parents going to react? What are the elders going to say? Make decisions that would benefit me and not necessarily think about everyone else all the time. I would tell my younger self, speak up, ask questions, don't be afraid um to express that you disagree with something. Yeah, that's what I would tell my younger self. And definitely leave being in a cult. We're doing a cult.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Crystalyn, for this wonderful conversation, chatting with us today about your professional and personal life. And I'm so happy to call you one of my friends. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
So always remember, my friends, to own your story, own your power, and live your truth.